So last time we wrapped up Dunnigan's farm. Curtis's men gave Price's Missourians a solid bloody nose and scattered them south and proved that the state guard could no longer strut around in Missouri like they owned the place. And clearing Price and those pesky graycoats out of the state, hey, that's the win. Mission accomplished. But Samuel Curtis isn't one to just pat himself on the back and go home for hot chocolate. Price had to run somewhere, and Curtis wasn't about to let him hole up in the Ozarks, lick his wounds, and plot a triumphant Missouri comeback tour. So the next logical move? Well, keep the pressure on. Chase him deep into Arkansas and make sure those boys in Butternut never stop moving long enough to catch their breath. So Curtis turns his frostbitten army south across the line, turning what started as a defensive stand into a winter pursuit nobody in blue really signed up for. And let's pick up right there. Curtis crossing into Arkansas, dead set on running Price until he either drops or disappears into a hole too deep to crawl out of. Curtis pushes into Arkansas to keep Price running and stop any Ozark regroup or Missouri comeback. By clearing the state guard from Missouri, that was a win. Chasing south was the logical next move, and, well, Price had to go somewhere, and Curtis planned just to keep him moving. By late February, Curtis reaches Cross Hollows near modern Rogers and squats in Price's abandoned camps. Sterling Price's boys cleared out around February the 19th in a total hurry, torching their own cabins, barracks, and supplies so the Yankees couldn't use them. Classic scorched earth pettiness. When Curtis and his half-starved troops rolled in, the place is still smoldering, and there's about 200 chickens or so just strutting around in the ashes like they own the joint. The Federals, running on fumes after that brutal winter march, rounded up the birds in record time and got fires going. Finally, we're going to have some dinner. But then, a sharp-eyed officer walks by, takes one look, and stops everyone cold. Hey, hold up, boys. These ain't your grandma's laying hens. These are fighting gamecocks. Well, turns out the 3rd Louisiana Infantry, big cockfighting fans back at home, had kept those feisty roosters in camp for weekend brawls and ditched them in the panic. So the troops, they spare the survivors, cracked up laughing and start naming the roosters after big-shot rebel generals. Lee versus Jackson, and Beauregard strutting his stuff. The whole Confederate high command reduced to barnyard smackdown. Instant camp entertainment. Watch the generals duke it out, while the real war raged down the road. Gotta love the absurdity. Nothing says grim campaign like turning enemy mascots into a feathered cage match. Scouts report growing Confederate strength, so Curtis pulls back to a stronger line along Little Sugar Creek near Pea Ridge, right across from Dunnigan's farm, and he digs in, waiting for reinforcements. Meanwhile, Confederate President Jefferson Davis appoints Major General Earl Van Dorn to command the Army of the West on January the 29th, and he merges Price and McCulloch together despite their beef and tosses in Albert Pike's Cherokee and Choctaw regiments because, why not? The Native Americans in the Indian Territory, they don't want to budge an inch. Those fresh Confederate treaties are their new favorite excuse, and they're flat out refusing to leave the Indian Territory until old Jeff Davis wires an advance payment first. Loyalty's nice and all, but cash talks louder than any old alliance promise these days. Van Dorn was Davis's third choice. Albert Sidney Johnston and Braxton Bragg both said hard pass on the Trans-Mississippi gig. A flashy West Pointer, technically, Van Dorn was a 42 grad who scraped in dead last because apparently rock bottom is his comfort zone. He's a Mexican War wound collector who got perforated so often he must have thought bullets were love taps. He's also a tireless Indian fighter who kept his aggression dialed to psychotic. Dude was a scandal-plagued skirt chaser whose bedroom conquests kept the rumor mill hotter than a cannon barrel. He was also Andrew Jackson's nephew, so he inherited that signature brand of reckless, mouthy Southern swagger. But as an administrator, he's a total train wreck. He's impatient and about as organized as a tornado in a paperwork factory. In late 1862, he bails out of Pocahontas like it's radioactive on a breakneck 200-mile overland suicide run to the Boston Mountains, desperate to crash the Pea Ridge Party before it ends without his brilliant leadership. Because showing up late, half dead, and furious is clearly how you turn the tide. Absolute legend in his own mind. He kicks things off by floating down the Black River for a quicker start because, why slog on foot when you can let the water do the heavy lifting? And then it was boots on the ground time through the brutal winter muck. On February the 25th, they hit the swollen Red River. Van Dorn piles into a dugout canoe with some local ferryman who's clearly never heard of steady hands. The guy botches it so spectacularly, the canoe then flips and the general gets dunked headfirst into water so cold it could have frozen hell over. He hauls himself out looking like a soggy, pissed-off cat and unleashed a fiery streak of curses that probably scorched the nearby trees, and the poor guy, that smart fella, he hightails it out of reach until the boss dries off and stops fuming. But that icy bath didn't just ruin his uniform, it gives him a nasty chill that ballooned into a full-on fever, and he spent the rest of the grueling trek bundled up in an ambulance like some Confederate diva, rolling in weekend around March 3rd or 4th. Classic case of hurry up and get sick. His breakneck rush just set him up to be foggy and frail right when the bullets started flying. Curtis's men scrape by on short rations in hostile territory. One soldier gripes about rough, frozen roads and a harsh winter campaign. Confederates? They're worn down too, and desertions continue to climb as Van Dorn's force march and a blizzard gets underway. By March the 5th, Van Dorn reaches Elm Springs, primed to strike. Curtis sees this and he orders Sigel to consolidate at Little Sugar Creek, setting the stage for the Bentonville crisis on March the 6th. That night into early March the 6th, Sigel's 1st and 2nd Divisions, about 7,000 mostly German immigrants, camp at McKissick's farm near Centerton in an area now swallowed by development. Sigel breaks camp early. His main column passes through Bentonville between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. and reaches Little Sugar Creek fortifications by about 2 p.m. We're standing now on the west side of the Bentonville Square, ground zero for the morning of March the 6th, 1862. Sigel rolls in here between 8:30 and 9 a.m. with his rear guard, roughly 600 homies from the 4th and 5th Missouri Cavalry, along with pieces of the 25th and 44th Illinois Infantry and Captain Lewis Hoffman's 6-gun battery. The main 7,000 Germans already pushed to the east, and Sigel claims he's covering the retreat and scouting, but let's be honest, he's still stinging from Wilson's Creek and probably hunting redemption points. Around 9:30, he settles in at the Eagle Hotel. Locals are going to recognize that as Fat Tire for breakfast. Ham, eggs, coffee. He's living his best life. The square's quiet, rifles are stacked, guards are chilling, and locals are peeking nervously. Then the scouts burst in. Confederate cavalry under Brigadier General James McIntosh can be seen from west and south. McIntosh's 3,000 men form a line about a mile south of town, roughly where 14th Street is now. The Confederate plan was supposed to be a textbook envelopment masterpiece, except those guys clearly skipped the chapter on Don't Screw It Up. Brigadier General James McIntosh, strutting at the head of his 3,000-man mounted brigade, was tasked with pulling off the fancy part. Swing wide to the north of Bentonville, hook east like a pro, and plant himself squarely across Sigel's escape route at a key wide junction, ready to slam the door from the north and turn the whole thing into a perfect Confederate sandwich. Meanwhile, Colonel Elijah Gates, commanding the 1st Missouri Cavalry, was supposed to play the blunt instrument, charging straight in from the south and along the main road and shove Sigel's boys backward like cattle into McIntosh's waiting jaws and watch the Union detachment get annihilated in glorious crossfire. But Sigel has to ditch his half-eaten breakfast. He mounts up and orders defensive line right in the streets in the square. Union boys duck behind houses, fences, and doorways, and they start popping volleys at advancing Rebs. Fighting spreads throughout the town. Colonel Elijah Gates' 1st Missouri Cavalry charges from the south to cut off the retreat. Sigel starts pulling east along today's Central Avenue. Sigel is playing right into the Confederate game plan. He crests this small little rise about a mile east. It's now the glamorous parking lot of the Bentonville neighborhood market because nothing says historic battlefield like discount diapers and grocery carts. But from here, Sigel clocks Gates barreling in from the south like he's late for barbecue, and he spots an ammunition wagon stalled dead ahead, tongue snapped like a cheap wishbone being guarded by a hapless detachment of the 36th Illinois. Time to move, Franz, or it's curtains. Sigel slams a cannon or two right on this rise and plays director, personally barking orders as the guns belch canister and shell, turning Gates' troopers into shredded confetti and killing their momenter deader than disco. However, Gates does snag the wagon and its 40 to 50 guards for a hot second, like congrats on the participation trophy, but Sigel's main column guard rushes up like over-caffeinated heroes, and in the chaotic melee of swinging fist and flying lead, they free most of the prisoners. Because, why can we let the Confederates have nice things? So with this ridge buying him precious seconds and probably costing him a few ulcers, Sigel orchestrates this oh-so-disciplined leapfrog retreat east. We're moving now on to Blueberry Lane, and this is part of the original roadbed that Sigel would have retreated past. And that stalled wagon, folks, well, it would have been right here. Tongue snapped, shells scattered like drunken confetti. The road barrels east and slices under where I-49 squats today like an overgrown eyesore, and then it plunges down into a valley. So buckle up. Let's dive into that brutal valley stretch and feel that pain. We're talking roughly a 7-mile nightmare from hell. Muddy slop, ruts deep enough to swallow egos, and steep climbs that mock your quads, as well as creek crossings that turn boots into sponges. Sigel's troops alternate like a bad game of musical chairs. The infantry digs in while the artillery blasts away and then swaps under cover before the Rebs can blink. Sigel himself plays hilltop overlord, personally directing guns, eyeballing the enemy like a paranoid hawk, and then yanking back just in time. See, Sigel was the Union's undisputed master of the tactical retrograde. I mean, he was brilliant at turning advance into advance in the opposite direction faster than you can say strategic withdrawal. Hell on retreat? Oh yeah, and this guy was legendary at it. The artillery and caissons, yeah, they're having a grand old time wrestling the terrain. The horses, they're still slipping on this ice like Bambi on steroids, and wagons are tilting like drunk uncles at a wedding. Ammo chests tumbling, scattering, or straight up vanishing into the muck below. Meanwhile, McIntosh's brilliant northern envelopment, it's a total flop. He veers too far to the north into thick oak woods and underbrush denser than a Confederate general's skull, and he can't find a quick eastward path. This gives Sigel all the breathing room he needs, like a gift-wrapped mulligan. By the time McIntosh course corrects and stumbles into the valley, Sigel's already blown past this wide junction, and it's this fork here where Sigel's route met in Little Sugar Creek Valley. McIntosh's lead dogs, they're spearheaded by Lieutenant Colonel Walter Peeline's 3rd Texas Cavalry. They finally burst from the eastern trails like they're auditioning for a Wild West show, charging Sigel's tail with sabers flashing and carbines roaring like they're overcompensating cowboys. The Texans hit hard, dreaming of smashing the rear and trapping the stragglers in a glory blaze. Lane's surge echoes off these cliffs like a bad karaoke. But Sigel's rear guard, well, they're beefed up by that 6-gun battery. It stands firm like they've got nothing better to do. Artillery from the ridges unloads canister, ripping gaps into the ranks wider than Texas egos. Infantry volleys from fences and creek banks turn this junction into a smoking haze of smoke and lead-fueled hell. Brief but vicious, hand-to-hand brawls in spots with bayonets flashing like cheap fireworks and dudes grappling in the mud so hard it would make the pigs jealous. But one Texas trooper later remarked that the Union barrage, quote, shut our mouths and opened our eyes. That's a great quote. Lane stumbles, though, and he falters. About 10 Confederates kiss the dirt dead, and 20 plus more limp off wounded. Momentum? Well, it's shattered like fine china in the stampede. Sigel smirks and slips away into the valley folds. McIntosh yanks back, the envelopment dreams crushed like a beer can at a tailgate. Sigel dodges the trap, rear guard battered but not broken. His division is preserved for the real fireworks ahead. And as dusk crashes the party and the gunfire sputters out, the Union column slinks into Curtis's lines like a cat with 9 lives. Van Dorn huddles up here at Camp Stevens that evening and then launches his genius Bentonville detour night march around 8 p.m. But hey, 30 minutes earlier, that held wagon plus the ravine ammo losses compounded like a bad debt, Sigel could have been a crippled, a major setback, game over. Instead, his tactical grit and a heaping sight of Confederate clownery saves the day. Because in this war, luck's just incompetence in a fancy hat.